Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
So today, Canto 5, Shrimad Bhagavatam, Chapter 14, The Material World as the Great Forest of Enjoyment. Text from 25th to 26th. Karpajana Prabhu, would you please read the Sanskrit?
Dasanam pratinidhivarane kalpo duranta chintaya vishanna aste.
The translation of the text. Being unable to protect himself from the threefold miseries of material existence, the conditioned soul becomes very morose and lives a life of lamentation. These threefold miseries are miseries suffered by mental calamity at the hands of the demigods, such as freezing wind and scorching heat, miseries offered by other living entities, and miseries arising from the mind and body themselves. So you see, this is a very simple formula. 3 sources of lamentations. It's classified for us in a simple way. All desires are located in the mind of a person. They're located right over there. And there we feel them. This is like a life of our desires. These are the emotions, some passionate desires, desires that haven't come true, just like our imagination and fantasies, and the desires that are following us at every step that we take. Even when we are walking down the parikrama road, we still have some desires not to step on a stone, for example, or on a thorn. So this ongoing process never stops in our mind. We keep thinking about something. So we don't want to feel scorching heat or hunger. It's undesirable for us. That's what we think of all the time. And we always want to live in comfort after a hard working day. And if this desired subject touches our senses, I think that my life is successful. And if it doesn't come in touch with my senses, I think that my life is unsuccessful. That's how our life works. So I really want to have this contact with the objects that I want to have. I want to feel them, I want to touch them. They have to be connected with my senses. If they don't come in contact with my senses, I'm not happy. That's how it works. That's how mind and senses are working. They're separate. And sometimes if the desired object is not reachable for me, this is a problem. So there are 2 aspects, time and space, that are surrounding us. So as our mind develops, a person can perceive this world differently, perceive space and time differently. So usually an ordinary person does not even perceive the space that he's living in, especially the earth and the universe. He doesn't even know how it works. But Shastras, they give us this description for the person's mind. The universe, it says that the universe has these dimensions, like specific dimensions, great dimensions, and great time that we cannot even measure using the means that we have. So this is totally inaccessible for our mind. It's inaccessible for mind, but when you change your mind, your perception of this world changes as well. So I think that all these years that I have lived on this earth, it's called life. That's what I think life is. And the space that I possess with the help of this body is also my measurement, my evaluation of what the life is. So when the furniture designers, when they project all this furniture and interiors, they work on interiors, they apply the knowledge in daily life, they're taught these skills. So they have a task to create a kitchen. So there has to be a sink, a stove, some table, cabinets, all these things, and all these shelves. And how do you define all this stuff? So you have to understand the proportions of a person's body. So you have to be based on the size of a human's body. Everything should be comfortable. You have to take into account a lot of things. So the source of this measurement is your physical body. So philosophy works just the same way. It's based on your desires' fulfillment. And your desires are limited, just like this kitchen. So when you do some remodeling, both in your kitchen or in your bathroom or living room, bedroom, you're thinking only about your body. It's only the bodily conception. Because if the object of your desires does not gratify your senses, your mind will not be satisfied. That's why yoga is all about working with your mind. So no matter what you do in your life, mind is never satisfied because it gets used to everything you have. Why? Because there's an absolute truth. It's everywhere. It exists everywhere. It reminds of itself. And until a person reaches the consciousness of absolute, the mind will never be satisfied, no matter how long it serves the senses, no matter how many people it meets, how many families it creates, until it touches upon the absolute truth, the source of all this diversity, the mind will never be satisfied. It will never stop. This will be a limitless births and deaths. And the mind will be just trying to fulfill its desires endlessly. And here it says, a person as a conditioned soul is not even able to get rid of all these sufferings and lamentations. All this is connected with a person's mind. So these lamentations are given here in Sanskrit, Adhidavika, Adhyatmika, and Adhibhautika. So let's read the purport. The so-called happy materialistic person is constantly having to endure the threefold miseries of life. Adhyatmika, Adhyamtika, and Adhibhautika. Actually, no one can counteract these threefold miseries. All three may assail one at one time, or one misery may be absent and the other present. Thus, the living entity is full of anxiety, fear and misery from one side or the other. The conditioned soul must be disturbed by at least one of these three miseries. There is no escape. What about the miseries? Well, they possess a huge influence on the person's mind. So once you feel the real suffering, you will be afraid of this lamentation for your entire life. You have this samskara, this imprint. Even though if the person has already changed his physical body, you still have this samskara. So there are so-called old souls that exist in this material world for so many incarnations, for about kalpa, maybe another kalpa. So they've been reincarnating here for so many lives, because they are afraid of life. Hippies, for example, see, they've refused the civilized life because they get afraid of the senselessness of being. It's like we are enslaved. You have to work up until you get retired. So a lot of people are afraid of it, and that's why they become hippies. They're just afraid of this senselessness. Other people that are not afraid, but we do understand that sometimes we suffer senselessly, like we don't even see any meaning in that, any reason of suffering. And when the person starts thinking about time and space, you instantly understand that there's no sense in anything. And here I am, living just for a few years, especially on the scale of the whole universe. Doesn't make any sense. So this fear demands some protection, some illusion. Just stop thinking about it. You start looking at some flowers blossoming, or look at this beautiful lady, look at this interesting guy. So we meet each other and we forget about all this senselessness. There has to be some sense. There should be some sense in enjoyment. So that's why people just start enjoying, because there's no other way out for the conditioned soul. They're forced to have these lamentations because they think that they will be enjoying this life. It only seems to them like that. But matter of fact, they're in space of time and they will touch upon this anyways. Sooner or later, this person will get scared of life, will get afraid. Before this, he thought that everything is wonderful in my life. I'm surrounded by my relatives, I got a house, a car. But then suddenly you feel like, you feel this fear, you feel like everything gets destroyed in your life. So this is your mental samskara of birth and death. We've already had all this death and reincarnations. But every time this is a panic fear. Just when you think of it, it's a panic fear. That's what kind of experience we'll remember. And these samskaras, they build up. And this fear gets deeper. It's a freezing, paralyzing fear. Even if you say that there's no death and the soul is eternal, you still get petrified only thinking about it. So of course, I've just added up some emotions here. And now I'm going to read text number 26. As far as transactions with money are concerned, if one person cheats another by a farthing or less, they become enemies. You see, you just need a little reason, a small reason to ruin your relationships. It's very easy to do that. It's very easy to ruin your relationships, but to recover them is not an easy trick. So some people, they even refer to some professionals to erase your memory. Well, I've heard that is not so effective, but some people, they just want to forget some episodes in their lives, forget some people, because it's not possible to live with such a memory. Perfect. This is called samsara davanala. Even in ordinary transactions between two people, there's invariably cheating, because the conditioned soul is defective in 4 ways. He is illusioned, he commits mistakes, his knowledge is imperfect, and he has a propensity to cheat. Every soul is like that. Every soul is the source of lamentation for other souls. So when we express our imperfection, it also influences other souls. A bad impression is created when people see that. So we cheat one another. So yesterday I received a link that psychologists, they've discovered a new disease. So this is kind of an inclination to cheat on one another. It's an inclination to tell lies to each other. So it's a social phenomenon that is considered to be a disease. Well, sometimes if it's like 1 or 2 people, but now it's all global. It turns out that no one says any truth anymore, and there's no reason for that. It's just an inclination, just an attachment to lying, to deception. Well, we used to practice it when we were children, right? When you're a child, you are naturally inclined. So, when you're a child, you just build in some kind of a little house and you consider it to be a real house. This is also deception, right? When I was a child, I saw a dog, a street dog, and we took it home. So we were so unhappy. We built a house for this dog. We fed it. So it was kind of a house for her. We even created a fence for this dog, even a door. So we pushed this dog into this so-called house, and this dog couldn't understand what was going on. You see all these childish illusions that we had back then. It was very funny. And then when this dog got into this house, it just took apart. The fence just fell on the ground, the house took apart. So that's all about children. And now this is kind of a real illness these days. So there's a mantra that does not liberate you from your duties. This is called tomorrow. We keep saying tomorrow, 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 and it keeps going on. But as a result, you are fully not satisfied in your life, you are upset, disappointed, people do not believe you. This is just one of the examples. It's not only deception. We are all illusioned, and our knowledge is imperfect. So you see, we all have these 4 defective ways. And ISKCON is not an exception. Read this philosophy and think that having read one book, we know everything already. No, wait a second. It's not like that. Even when you read Shastras, you're still under the influence of illusion. So you have to control your senses. You only have an opinion. You're trying to be a philosopher until you control your senses. This is almost not true. When you read Shastras, it has to be followed by controlling your senses. So everyone is a philosopher, and you keep arguing with this and with that. Someone says there's no God, someone says God exists, and it continues forever. So take these 4 regulative principles, chant Mahamaj, and then we'll talk. My dear friend, you need to have some practice. It's not only about what you think logically, and you feel like you're a big philosopher right now. This is all silliness. That's why conflicts happen. Unless one is liberated from material conditioning, these 4 defects must be there. Consequently, every man has a cheating propensity, which is employed in business or money transactions. See, first of all, it happens there. We all want to have money, and that's why this problem is so acute. Although 2 friends may be living peacefully together, due to their propensity to cheat, they become enemies when there's a transaction between them. A philosopher accuses an economist of being a cheater. An economist may accuse a philosopher of being a cheater when he comes in contact with money. So again, an economist may accuse a philosopher of being a cheater when he comes in contact with money. He would become a cheater as well. In any case, this is the condition of material life. One may profess a high philosophy, but when one is in need of money, he becomes a cheater. In this life, I'm not a cheater but a philosopher. This is a subtle cheating. I have some intelligence, but I'm the same cheater. In this material world, so-called scientists, philosophers, and economists are nothing but cheaters in one way or another. The scientists are cheaters because they present so many bogus things in the name of science. They propose going to the moon, but actually they end up cheating the entire public of large sums of money for their experiments. They cannot do anything useful. You see, these bankers are so smart. They're called bankers, they're scientists, not cheaters. See, this situation is quite curious. Unless one can find a person transcendental to the 4 basic defects, one should not accept advice and become a victim of the material condition. The best process is to take the advice and instructions of Shri Krishna or his bona fide representative. In this way, one can be happy in this life and next. Yes, you must know that preaching Bhagavad Gita, not being on the transcendental level, is very painful, because you have to correspond to what you're saying. Every person is not perfect. This is going to be very difficult for him to tell true things, because his conscience will be telling him that he's cheating. Even when you say something, you have to try to be this person. When you lie, even knowing Bhagavad Gita, you will be taught nothing, because your conscience will not help you. When you lie, and if it's normal for you, no truth is going to help you. This is a very important detail. For example, not all beginning devotees can follow strictly all the 4 regulative principles, especially the 4th one. So not every devotee can stick to celibacy for the entire life. So what are we supposed to preach here on this platform? The sexual life? Not, of course. Even if something doesn't work out, do not distort the truth. You have to control it. That's how you can learn to preach. Well, even if I can't do something, I have to tell the truth. You have to get on this level, to get rid of all these sexual desires and other sins, other imperfections and weaknesses. There can be no philosophical compromises. There is no compromise with the absolute truth. You cannot distort philosophy. There are some protective measures in Shastras against the lies. And everyone should be truthful, according to Varnashrama Dharma. If you're Brahman, Shudra, Vaishya, just take your position, understand who you are. It all starts with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You have to be in your ashram. Do not pretend to be renounced. You have to become renounced before you take sannyasa. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that there are some cheaters, pretenders. They chant mantra, they chant the mantra, they dress up accordingly, and they think of themselves to be elevated philosophers or teachers or preachers, but they're not. And then, as it turns out, they have some defective activity, first in the mind and then practically. This is cheating. So it's better to take up a really truthful position, just like Bhaktivinoda Thakur used to say. Sannyasi having some affairs with women, he's not a devotee at all. But then he was asked about grihasthas. He said, well, this is okay. They're living families. They're not telling lies. They sincerely take up grihastha ashram and they behave accordingly to this position. But sannyasi having some affairs with women are not considered to be devotees at all. They are hypocrites. So if I'm a devotee and I'm someone else in the shade, I'm not a devotee at all. I'm a cheater. He cheats, he lies to himself, he lies to other people. So that's why everyone has some weaknesses, but we have to tell the truth. First of all, to ourselves. When we preach, first of all, we have to preach to ourselves. If we have some weaknesses, we have to learn what it means in the books of Srila Prabhupada. We have to study what it means in order to examine ourselves, not to show it to other people, but first of all to ourselves. We have to admit it. So these 4 imperfections, defects, they impede our soul to live in this material world. To be truthful means every day I have to chant 16 rounds every day, follow the regulative principles for as well as I can, and do not distort the philosophy. Read Shrimad Bhagavatam. Read Srila Prabhupada's books with self-consciousness in order to give some instructions to the others. So these are a few words based on these texts. So we've covered this topic quite quickly today, but undoubtedly we will have some discussion today. Thank you, Chaitanya Chandra Charan prabhu. So Victor, can you please make an announcement?
Харе Кришна, дорогие преданные, примите мои поклоны. Те, кто смотрит нас на YouTube, пожалуйста, переходите по ссылке в описании под видео,
So
присылайте свои
please
вопросы к нам в Telegram-бот.
check the
Мы постараемся выделить время в
those
конце
who are
эфира
watching
зачитать.
YouTube right now.
Преданные в Zoom,
You
нажимайте
can
на кнопку
comment
реакций.
in
Там
the
есть
section
такой подпункт
below where the comments are.
Нажимайте
You can
поднять
also
руку,
visit our
подключим вам
chat bot.
микрофон, дадим
Those
возможность
who are in
сделать
Zoom,
дополнение.
raise your hand first and then I'll give you the word. Thank you so much.
Chaitanya Chandra Charan prabhu, если позволите, я бы хотел бы на нескольких местах остановиться, может быть, обсуждение.
So I'd like to discuss some details that we've covered today. Let's start from the end. Deception, philosophers.
Мы говорим о философах.
So when we speak of philosophers,
Это в прошлом было философы.
it feels like
Диоген, допустим, по-моему, с Александром Македонским, да, он встречался. Диоген, который жил.
So these philosophers that they used to be in the past,
Диоген, да, его звали.
just like the one that we all know.
Такие стойки, философы.
Remember this one that used to meet even with the Alexander the Great,
Был счастлив.
the one that
Другие философы,
used to live just in a wooden bottle,
есть ли вообще сейчас философы?
like Socrates.
Потому что они все похожи.
Are there any philosophers these days?
То есть стали жертвой этих денег.
It seems like they've all been bought. They've become
Когда философ назвал его мошенником, он говорит,
the victims of this world.
Я тебе дам деньги, посмотрим, как ты будешь дальше.
So there's a story. One philosopher is given some money by another person, and then this person says, I'll give you some money and I will see the way you will change. Because this Lakshmi, this money, it has some power and it might change you.
Практически сейчас браманов очень мало, настоящих философов.
So now the real philosophers and the real Brahmins, there are not many of them. Srila Prabhupada gives us a hint that flying to the moon, it's all deception. One deception after another one. All the scientists, they can be bought. But behind all these, there are some people that are very wealthy and they manipulate the others, using so-called give us knowledge that we could actually apply in real life. So now the psychologists, they make money. So you see, everything again becomes de-evaluated. So until the person gets unselfish help, he will never get this samskara. Until he gets this love of relationships, he will never get this samskara. This is all lies, deception. You don't think that he got he received some bhakti from a bot psychologist? No, just everything's working according to the scheme. But as far as there's no samskara, this person doesn't really receive anything. It reminds of some knowledge, but there's no essence in it. There's no samskara. Saving samskara. Until a person meets a true, a pure devotee that doesn't need anything from you and is ready to save you, to save your soul, until this person meets such a person, he will never get this samskara. Because all the philosophers and teachers, they are crooked these days. So Srila Prabhupada says that one of the last true brahmanas was Chalakya Pandit, that was living in the castle of Chandragupta, but he was living his own hut, like separately. So he would never compromise his principles of being a Brahman. So he didn't get any salary just to refrain from being corrupt. You see, if someone gives you some money, he can manipulate you.
Очень просто. Даже говорится, что он
As simple as this.
не
It is
покупал
said
ghee,
that
вернее,
he even wouldn't buy ghee,
у него
well,
были-
to be more precise.
То есть он поклонялся божествам, и, соответственно, он должен был
So
покупать ghee.
he used to worship deities, and of course
Он
he
покупал ghee именно на свои деньги. Видите,
had
как
to
бы
buy
это
ghee.
называли.
So he used to buy ghee for his own money.
То есть казенных денег он никогда не использовал.
So he didn't take any money from the government.
Конечно же, преданный вайшнав может быть правдивым, даже если у него есть огромное количество богатства. потому
Of
что
course, a
он
devotee can be truthful as
всё
well.
принадлежит Кришне.
Even if he's really wealthy, he understands that everything belongs to Krishna.
Соответственно, такой человек тоже не зависит
Everything
от
should be used in order to serve God.
соблазнов,
Of course, this
богатства.
person might not depend
То есть
on all
два
these
варианта.
seductions.
Браманы, философы должны быть,
So Brahmins and philosophers, they should be,
использовать служение Господу.
or Vaishnavas,
Говорить
they
правду.
can bring truth into this world, and they can be true philosophers. Can we conclude such a thing? So Chanakya Pandit, he used to live in one Indian village, so he used to have a school for children. He used to teach children. He was so intelligent that everybody knew about him. And the king Chandragupta, he called upon him. He needed some help. So you see, he needed his help not just to buy him. He asked him to unite India because there was a threat from being conquered by other peoples. So they were in conflict, and this kingdom was just taken apart. So he called upon him. He asked him for help. And Chanakya Pandit, he was living. But he wasn't biased. He was very powerful, and he could destroy all the enemies of this king by just one his word, independently. And then when Chandragupta, he's become king again, so he proposed to his Brahman to stay with him in this kingdom, but he said that no, not at all. I'm not going to live together with you because I will become corrupt. I just want to go back to my village and continue teaching children. So this is a real Brahman. So he rejected living at court. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to give this samskara. That's why we worship our spiritual master, and this is samskara. Without this samskara, we cannot get this deep knowledge. Will you worship to someone who gives you money or someone that you pay to? There's no samskara. It's all empty. Illusion.
Как вайшнав может
So,
также практиковать этот принцип правдивости.
so how can Vaishnava practice this principle of being truthful, not being dependent on this wealth and position in life? Because there are different Vaishnavas. Well, yeah, different degrees of power, of strength of Vaishnavas. The more potent Vaishnavas spiritually, they have to preach to the beginners. That's how it works. See these three levels, three categories of Vaishnavas. So Adhikara means devotedness, the pure devotees. Of course, we have to accept the authority, just like Uttama. So we have this movement. We're all at different levels, right? Someone is just beginning, someone is in the middle, someone is very elevated already. But we are all based on Srila Prabhupada. That's how it all works.
можно к предыдущему стиху насчет тройственных страданий вернуться.
So can we just go back a little bit to the previous text?
Современная цивилизация пытается максимально уменьшить
About the
беспокойство,
threefold
причиняемое
miseries.
природой, климатическими условиями, как Шрила Прабхупада пишет здесь в
So
комментарии.
Srila Prabhupada says
В
that
самом стихе, вернее, в самом стихе, в скобках, эти тройственные страдания
so these
встречаются и
threefold
страдания, причиняемые полубогами.
miseries,
Например,
they also include miseries caused by demigods, like freezing
и современная
wind or
цивилизация,
scorching
она как бы борется
heat.
достаточно, мне кажется,
So in this civilization we are fighting against it, and I think quite effectively.
невыносимой жары, можно сказать, практически нет.
And there's no, we can say there's no scorching hot these days because there are some conditioning systems that create discomfort. We protect ourselves against the cold wind. We build these houses with thick walls and heating systems. So we're trying to protect ourselves.
С остальными страданиями, по-моему, не защищены никто.
But it seems like we're not coping with the rest of the miseries.
Страдания от собственного тела и ума, потому что нет духовной практики или какого-то благочестия.
That's because we don't have this spiritual practice. And of course, we're not protecting from the other living entities, like our neighbors, even our neighbors. And in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that demigods, they give us a lot of benedictions, and we have to cooperate with them. So we have to have yagyas, and that's when these problems are solved. And then Srila Prabhupada says in the 4th canto of Shrimad Bhagavatam, 8th chapter, 34th verse, if we cooperate with the elders, equal and youngers, this is a very interesting topic because Srila Prabhupada mentions about it, commenting the instructions of Narada Muni that he had given to Dhruva Maharaj. So if we cooperate and serve to elders, respect them, receive their benedictions, then the climate sufferings and that nature gives us, they will be nullified, they will be brought to minimum. If we can be friends with the equal ones, to serve together with them, then the lamentations caused by our own body and mind will be nullified as well. And if we take care of the youngers, then accordingly we bring to the zero all the lamentations that we have from other living entities. So there's a great comment. 4.8.34 from Shrimad Bhagavatam. So these technologies that we can use on a subtle level to decrease these sufferings. But modern materialists, not knowing all these technologies, they try to avoid this heat and cold, trying to create some material things in order to protect ourselves. And today you've also said there's some disease or illness that people have, which is the inclination to lie to each other all the time. There are a lot of psychological problems and violence that we have these days. Yeah, this is a very good topic, Bhajana Prabhu. Yeah, there's a condition of mind that a person might have. It might be caused by constant stress or a continuous disease. We call it, being capricious. or annoyed. So it can touch upon anyone. It can happen to anyone. So when I'm sick, for example, I don't want other people to take care of me because I don't want to disturb them. Then I become so annoyed by every little detail that happens in my life, every little episode that distracts me. So if a person is very sick that he cannot even get out of his bed, and when person taking care of him leaves the room, that person, the line person, thinks that he is abandoned. When you're healthy, if someone leaves you for like 2 hours, you feel totally fine. You don't suffer about it. This is about the condition of your mind. And when you said about these conditioning systems and these modern technologies that make our living comfortable these days, yeah, this is comfortable for our body. And our mind thinks that we have conquered the nature. All the scientists, they are inclined to lord it over the nature. So we exploit the nature and we become enemies to the nature. So we think that we have to control it, we have to lord it over. And that's how this pride and tendencies develop against the nature, factually. So they intrude in all the spheres of life and the planet itself. Things that they do with the animals, with forests, with nationalities, with all these differences that we have, with all the insects. So they try to understand how to deal with it. They just poison the plants, the animals, the conquerors of the world. See, they create these conditioning systems, but the mind, it becomes demoniac. And now we cannot even be friends to each other. That's why we refer to psychologists. You go to a psychologist, he gives you one phrase, and then you try to use this phrase in your real life, but it doesn't work. You just put a patch on your old clothes, but you're still wearing your old clothes. It doesn't change anything. When people worship demigods, you make some sacrifices for them. So then relationships, they recover, and the nature is recovering as well. When people understand that there's someone above them, like demigods, the people, they have this feeling of protection. We understand that there's some shelter when we believe in demigods. You know what scientists have noticed? So when it's cold outside, you go outside wearing just your t-shirt, it takes you several seconds and you want to go back because it's cold. But then when you are seeing off your guests, and you can be standing for 30 minutes talking to them, does not even pay attention to the cold outside, these cold conditions. It's the state of your mind. So now there are some differences that we have. 5,000 years ago, people could tolerate so many different things, but now we cannot even listen to each other. We cannot even finish listening to each other. So there's a problem we have these days. We have become so annoyed. And no one can just freely live out in the open air because we're all scared, we're all afraid. There's so much fear that we have. That's a comfort that we have. This is a false ego. We are so vulnerable. We don't have patience anymore. We're not humble anymore. We don't have any reverence. There's only desire that we have. Respect, respect, respect me, please. Pay some reverence to me. That's the world that we have created. So this topic is very interesting. So Srila Prabhupada says that in this material world, we can observe. So instead of rendering reverence to the elders, showing reverence to the elders, we try to take them down to our own level because we criticize them, we envy them. Instead of being friends to the equal ones, we compete with each other, trying to show that I am higher. And instead of taking care of the youngsters, we exploit them. We show some violence. And also Srila Prabhupada says about it in the first canto of Shrimad Bhagavatam, when Yudhishthira was ruling, and also during some other Raja Rishis, some other kings, Yudhishthira was the embodiment of dharma, and his reverence to the elders, his honesty, his inclination to tell truth, they were so solid in him that it is said that while Yudhishthira was ruling, demigods that would pour rains only at night, not to bother people. And at daytime, the sun wasn't scorching. It was shining, but it wasn't so hot. So we understand that behind all these natural phenomena, some real personalities are. Some real personalities are existent. They create all these things. So you see, there are some examples in the past how everything changes when we know and follow these processes. In addition, we can remember that Krishna in Bhagavad Gita says that the austerity for the body to worship the others, demigods, spiritual masters, your parents. And I think that for humanity, it's a great grace that we have some elders and we have an opportunity to serve to them. Especially when the elders, they become very weak, physically weak. They depend on the children, on the young children. I think that's a great bliss. If you take a look at it from the point of view of philosophy and spirituality, so Krishna arranges things in a way that we can serve and we can get this grace, this bliss. Whereas in this modern life, we send our parents away to some special houses. And these very obvious signs of Kali Yuga. We don't take care of the elders anymore and of the youngsters. Yeah, this is an interesting, wide topic. Maybe there are some questions that devotees have. Hare Krishna, please accept my obeisances, Chaitanya Chandra Charan prabhu. So I have a question that's probably connected with the other topic, and there are 4 questions in the chat board. I have a question about the desires. You've mentioned in the very beginning of your lecture that all desires are located in the mind, and it's also said that the initial source of desires is the soul. And there are some desires that are easier to be so there are some controversy between my desires. I want to stop smoking and don't want to stop smoking. So I have to follow the regulations, and at the same time I want to have the senses gratification. Some of them probably coming from my mind and some from my intelligence. Can you please help me out here? It's just a more detailed approach to this topic. Just to discuss it in more details. These are the details, because now we are talking in the context of one subtle body. Ego, intelligence, and mind is one solid thing. So it's called manas. This is all mind. So it makes just one solid thing, but mind, it lords over everything. So that's why we thought that it's in our mind. But you're right, desires are manifested in one person differently, another person in another way, and there's ahankara that dictates some things, some other things. So where is this ahankara? How is it manifested? Through our mind, intelligence and senses. So what is intelligence? That is also manifested as ahankara, influencing mind and senses. So what is mind as an ahankara, but influences our intelligence and senses? And what are the senses? There are influences that influences our intelligence and senses as well. It's just here today we've unified all these things. So the soul itself does not have any desires. It's like the soul is dreaming in sleep, like it's sleeping and seeing some dreams. So when we have some desires coming from our stomach, for example, that's how we have some, that's how we feel it. The soul itself does not have any desires. To sleep, to protect, to eat, to reproduce. The soul lives in the contact with Krishna. And now our soul is sleeping. That's why we call it desires in our mind. Thank you.
Если вопросов больше нет, я начну зачитывать то, что у нас есть в боте. Вопрос от Матаджи Ядурани.
So there's a question from Mataji Yadurani. Your Grace, tell us please about the difference Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. See, there's no difference, it's the same. Just read about Karma Yoga and activity in the Krishna's consciousness. Read it in Bhagavad Gita. This is the same thing. Thank you. How do I cope? How do I cope with too much criticizing myself for things that I have done in the past? So I have made some mistakes in the past and now I cannot cope with guilt. You just have to serve to Vaishnavas. That's how you can get rid of this guilt, the feeling of guilt. A servant always feels protected. Try it. For example, you are in some kind of society, you know a lot of people in there, then you like someone, you don't like some people. But there's an advice, a good advice. When we enter such a society, try to serve to someone, and everything will just go away. You just serve to someone, you will instantly have a good mood. Can I just add a little bit, if you allow? So probably the question implied that this guilt feeling it still remains because probably we've made some mistakes relating to our parents or relatives and they don't exist anymore, they're already dead and we cannot cope with this guilt feeling. I think that we can just serve, but to others, to some elders, to some elder people. In this way, you can get this bliss and liberate yourself from guilt feeling. And the most important thing is that you have to do it in Krishna's consciousness. Yeah, the devotees, they have different inclinations to serving, but anyways, you have to do it
Спасибо.
in the Krishna's consciousness.
Услышал в лекции, что когда человек пережил сильное страдание, он потом всю жизнь будет бояться подобного.
So once I've heard in
Когда
a
в обществе преданных
lecture that
чем-то, что
if you've had something really terrible in your thing, then you will always remember about that. It has this imprint.
теперь это самскара не дает
And now
доверия
this
преданным,
samskara does not allow me to trust to a spiritual master, to devotees, to Krishna.
преданному подобные страдания.
So what am I supposed to do if we have
Доверие. Возможно ли полностью
committed something terrible relating to some other devotees?
оскорбление?
How do I
После сильных
cope with it?
оскорблений вряд ли обычный человек сможет это сделать.
So it's difficult to cope with it if you're just an ordinary person. Of course, there are some Superman,
Они могут сделать любую
some
вещь.
spiritual giants, they can do whatever they want, just like Jesus Christ.
Вещей, пожалуйста.
He could forgive the people that were killing him.
Величина, видите, какая.
But you see, he's so great,
Обычный человек
we
не
cannot be
может жить
compared
с этим.
to him.
А,
An ordinary person, he will always be living with that.
Не нужно совершать оскорбления.
But if you've realized that you don't have to, that it's not a good thing to insult other people, insult each other, and then you feel some pain, it should stop you. That's the point. Now develop your spiritual samskaras until you have some, for as long as you have some faith, as long as you haven't destroyed it yet. And then when you have this very deep spiritual samskara, you'll become adequate again. Until you don't get more powerful, more potent spiritual samskara, you'll be always living with this negative samskara from the physical life for many lives. If we come to Krishna's consciousness from this mature life, we feel good. And then we start insulting each other even here. Where will you go? But then, at one stage of your life, you'll understand that that's enough. I should just start serving Krishna, listening to Shrimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, chanting holy names. That's what kind of samskara we all need. That's what is needed to be developed. Let's refer to Krishna. Let's come in contact with Krishna. He'll give you such a samskara that you will forget about even about your material existence. It loses this power above you, this control over you. You can, if you get this darshan of Krishna, you may forget about everything. Without Krishna, we all cry out the oceans of tears. That's what we all have to strive for, aspire for. So let's just all go to the Krishna's consciousness, forget about all these self-punishment things, self-chastising. So we'll keep on reading the questions. How can I help a devotee that is just beginning, that needs some help from devotees? So she's serving, she has some serving, and she needs a mentor, but she doesn't know how to do it. So we don't know how to help her. So the point is that you have to spend some time in order to understand who this person is. Even Guru needs a lot of time to examine his disciples. Well, in general, you understand everything. That Guru is against lording over the material nature and enjoyment, the senses gratification. But if you communicate with your spiritual master personally, he needs to understand who you are. And when some other spiritual masters came from west to Russia, it took them some time to understand what it's like to be Russian. So do not think that everyone will understand you so quickly. So do not be too quick in these relationships. In order to understand each other, you need to spend a lot of time and mutual effort. Without Krishna, it's impossible. Sometimes your mentors will be even shy of telling you, but just be patient and Krishna will arrange everything. Do not be in such a hurry. Do not draw these conclusions so quickly. Spend at least 5 years in these relationships, and then you may understand something. If you do not understand who you are yourself, how can you expect others to understand you? And when you get purified, you will become more clear to the others, more understandable. That's when it will be easier for us to understand each other. That's why Prabhupada wanted to organize this international society. It only exists in ISKCON, without any payment. Just it's all based on the relationships, and we have this devotional service, and we have this simplicity, these grammatical qualities. There's no difference between black and white or some other colors, some races. There's no difference because there's a soul. So be patient. Thank you. And the last question. Does it mean that the soul does not suffer, does not cry, and the soul does not have any material desires and has the only desire to serve God, and then it gets transformed and the mind accepts it as a material desire? How to understand where I am and where the material mind is? So the second part of the question is, soul does not have any material desires. The only desire that it has is to serve to God, but the mind thinks that it's a material desire to enjoy. Desire of the soul in the material world is to become God. Its only desire to become God or like God. It's all located in God, and its major desire to become God. That's why Ahankara is given, and all the rest of the attributes. They develop Ahankara on a physical plane. To become beautiful, to become rich, to become a scholar, to become glorified and powerful. These are all the attributes of God, and here in this physical world, a soul wants to become God. And there are no other desires as to the material desires, physical ones. The soul doesn't need anything else. The soul also only has this false desire to become God. And how can I understand where I am and where my mind is? That's why you chant Hare Krishna. How can you understand it? Just by having listened to one class of Bhagavatam? That it might cost you too expensive. I think it's gonna cost you like $1 million to understand it. So when you build up $1 million of samskaras, spiritual samskaras, then we'll talk. But first you have to earn this $1 million. It is possible to differentiate yourself from a subtle mind, your physical body, but you have to work in Krishna's consciousness. You have to do the spiritual activity. Philosophically is not enough. Philosophy is not enough. Just by thinking about it is not enough. You have to do something. You have to act. Thank you.
Прислали еще два вопроса.
So there are two more questions.
Добавить?
Karabachana Prabhu, if you want to add something.
Я хотел просто уже, если вопрос нет, сказать.
Ну,
Давай.
можно я зачитаю, да, два последних?
So two more
Вопрос.
questions.
Почему, когда слушаешь Махараджи, Кришна становится таким близким и
So when I listen to Maharajas,
уходит?
Krishna becomes so close, so simple, but then when I
Будет?
stop listening, he goes
Это
away.
просто понять это. Иллюзия называется.
Will I understand it? Will I have this feeling
Ты там попадаешь
soon
в
for my
область
entire life? Is
Майи,
it even
всё
possible?
отдаляется.
Of course, it will happen to you. This is all called Maya.
Покрываются,
When you are
растворяются.
under the influence of Maya,
Когда снова приближаемся к Кришне, иллюзия рассеивается. Все.
it's just when you get closer to Krishna, this illusion,
Холодно, на солнце
it
теплее.
gets away. It goes away.
Почему так происходит? Пока вы на солнце, вам тепло.
So when you are under the sun, it's warm. When you go into a shadow, it gets cold. The same thing, to always be in Krishna's consciousness. And eventually, just like Prabhupada says, it's a great art, it's a skill.
Вы самостоятельно как бы поддержите себе сознание Кришны. Ну, что могу посоветовать? Читайте книги Прабхупады достаточно.
So what can I tell you? Read books of Prabhupada
Много читайте, но недостаточно.
more and more. Maybe it's not enough. Reading for you.
Прям при каждой возможности. Открывайте книгу и читайте.
At every possibility that you have, open the book and read.
Вот так это будет вам очень помогать.
Можно я немножко тоже
And it's going to help you.
в связи с этой темой?
So I also have a
Если
question
читаешь и
connected
получается,
with this
как говорится,
topic.
смотришь книгу, видишь
So sometimes if you read the book, but
всё равно читать,
it's like
продолжать.
you see it, but you don't. You look at it, but you don't see it. You don't understand it. Well, anyways, it's a transcendental reading because you see you are in the book of Prabhupada.
Что это означает? Что вы
Even if you
понимаете,
don't
что да, вот мне нужно еще развиваться.
see, that means that you need to develop more.
Это уже
So this is also a good samskar. This is reading anyways.
Я все понимаю, что читаю.
Do you think I understand everything I read?
Ну фигу, ого.
Sometimes
Но я понимаю, это для моего
I
развития.
see a lot of
Над этим работать.
things that I don't understand.
Ничего страшного.
But I try to
Привыкайте,
develop.
привыкайте.
That's
Бывает,
okay.
что
Just
человек
get used to
не то,
that.
что вот он не понимает текст, да, а просто в прострации читает.
Sometimes a person, it's
Не
not
привык
it's not about not understanding the text, but sometimes
Более нужно
you're just
читать.
not being here.
Прострация — это
So you have
очень
to
плохой
discipline yourself.
для ума. Пока ум у вас в прострации, вы не сможете добиться никакой результата в
So
жизни.
while your mind is
И вот как
wandering
раз на чтении
somewhere,
книг вы можете увидеть, что ум в
of course you
прострации.
cannot concentrate on
Читаете,
reading.
он в прострации. Вы
So
не
that's why it's
думаете
about
ни о чём, просто в
concentration of your mind on
прострации.
reading.
Информация приходит,
You don't
но
get
не достигает
this
вас.
information.
Не достигает его. Есть даже название для такого умонастроения.
It's like your mind is in
Есть
prostration.
4 там или 5 различных умонастроения, как-нибудь расскажу вам об этом.
So there are 5 different
Это
set
одно
of
из
minds.
состояний прострации называется.
So one of these sets of mind is called prostration.
Есть прострация.
Most
Что
of the
делать?
people, they just like being in prostration. What are you doing? Nothing.
Ни о чем.
What are you thinking of?
Это прострация.
Nothing. So this is called
А нужно
prostration.
научиться быть сосредоточенным постоянно.
You have to
Это не только
teach yourself to be
усилие ума.
concentrated constantly.
Ум подчиняется,
It's not only about a mind,
более
your mind.
глубоким энергиям, самскарам, впечатлениям.
A mind is under the influence of more subtle energies. You have to
Поэтому
train
чтение книг
your
это,
mind.
наверное, лучший
So
способ
reading
для
books
нас, вот,
is probably the
дисциплинировать,
most
потому что
effective
когда вы
method
начинаете
to
проникать в смысл прочитанного, ум
teach your mind to be
автоматически становится
concentrated.
сосредоточенным, без усилий.
When you read something, you try to understand
Автоматически.
what you're reading. Your mind
Тут же.
automatically becomes concentrated
Читаете, читаете, и какие-то вещи будут
because it
проявляться,
captures your mind.
схватят,
So keep reading,
какие-то еще, потом
and a
еще
lot of
больше,
things
потом
will
вы
become
увидите
manifested in your
шанс
life.
целиком, да, какая мощь, это Бхагавад-гита,
Then you will understand this potency of Bhagavad Gita, such as you will get this really powerful samskara, as big as the earth, as the globe. You will be able to see Bhagavad Gita. You will see this samskara. So having this samskara will be not difficult for you to read Srila Prabhupada's books. Start with just reading one passage after another one. This is a good beginning.
Надо продолжать.
You just have to keep on reading.
Можно
Спасибо,
пару
Бас.
слов добавлю.
Да.
Мне лично очень помогает, когда я слушаю,
So it helps me a lot
вместе
when
с
I
другими,
listen or read together with someone else, with some other
встреч,
devotees, that can
строк, очень много смыслов
extract a lot of
глубоких.
sense
Либо когда я
between the
слушаю
lines.
лекцию, как сегодня,
Or when I
да, Chaitanya
listen
Chandra
to a lecture
Prabhu
just like today,
стоит комментарий, и столько
when you were reading
вообще извлек, да.
this text and
И это дает
commentaries,
дополнительную
I've
энергию,
extracted so many
вдохновение,
amazing
чтобы
things,
самостоятельно
and it
изучать,
really gives me
внимательно
some
читать книги Шрила Прабхупады.
strength and
Вот
motivation,
если сочетать эти два
inspiration
момента
to keep on reading.
и слушая тех, кто имеет вкус, извлекает
So by
много
listening
смыслов, то это дает
to this text from
дополнительную
someone that
энергию.
has this taste, it gives us a lot of energy.
Харе Кришна. Примананда Прабху поднимает
Hare
руку.
Krishna, Pramananda Prabhu is
Сейчас
raising
Чандрика
his hand.
пару слов скажет.
So Gaura Chandrika
Харе
wanted
Кришна.
to say a
Давайте
few words.
поприветствуем Матаджи Гауру Чандрику.
So let's all
Хари Хари Бол, Хари Хари Бол.
Меня слышно, да?
Да.
So can you hear me well?
Сейчас разговор шел о том, что помогает читать и слушать, да?
So we were just talking about what helps to read and listen.
Вот. Я хотела поделиться одним опытом.
So I wanted to
Я
share
думаю, это
one
опыт,
experience,
ну,
my
мне
experience,
даже хотелось его культивировать как-то.
and I even wanted to
определенным
cultivate
образом.
it in some
Опыт,
different way.
Что помогает понять Шримад Бхагаватам,
What
глубже
helps
её
to
понимание,
understand
понимание
Shrimad
вкус
Bhagavatam, to
даже.
get
Это
deeper into it, to have
чтение
this
в
taste.
малом кругу друзей,
So when you read
родственников.
Bhagavatam in a
Даже если вас
small circle of
начали,
friends
даже
or
если
your
вы
relatives,
читаете жене или
even
жене,
if there are two
супругу,
of you,
знаете,
when a
это
wife or
совсем
husband
другое
reads to each other,
слушание, понимание. То есть,
this is a whole different thing.
когда мы слушаем, слышим, да,
So when we
это
hear
неформальное
and listen
чтение, но
to
оно
it, it must be an
неформальным, потому что
informal reading,
вы окружены доброжелателями,
because you're surrounded by your
людьми, которые вас
well-wishers,
знают, вы их
people
хорошо
that know you
знаете,
well, you know
и
them
там
well,
открываются какие-то еще тайные уголочки сердца,
and there are
когда
some
начинает работать
hidden
сознание
parts of your
иначе.
heart
То есть одна ситуация, когда мы
open
слушаем
up. So
кого-то с висоасами,
one
да, какого-то
situation
старшего,
is when you
реализованного
listen to
преданного,
someone,
который очень хорошо это
some
понимает. Мы
realized devotee
вникаем,
that understands
вникаем
everything,
и проникаемся этой атмосферой его сознания.
and we understand the
Когда
atmosphere of
происходит
his
такое
consciousness.
мы находимся под его
It
влиянием,
happens automatically
нам
because
кажется,
we
что
are
мы
under
всё
his
знаем,
influence.
всё понимаем,
We
нам
penetrate into this
экстатично очень.
consciousness.
Но есть
It seems to us that we understand everything, so ecstatic.
уголочки, которые мы
But
сами
there are
не
some
развиваем.
hidden corners of our hearts that
Ну, относятся к индивидуальному
we do not
чтению.
develop ourselves.
Когда мы индивидуально читаем, у
When
нас
we
нет
read
этого
individually,
диалога.
we don't have this dialogue.
Развивается другая сторона, очень
Maybe
сокровенная,
another
славная.
aspect,
А вот когда идет диалог,
Smarnam is
если вы
developing.
читаете супруге,
But when you
супруга не
read
боится вам
to your
задать
husband or
вопрос,
wife, and your wife is not afraid to ask you
но это её
a
вопрос.
question, even if it's a silly question,
Это
but
её
this is
вопрос,
her
который она
question,
может задать человеку, который с навесасами,
that she may not probably ask
старше, преданный. Она
to another
стесняется,
person. Maybe she's shy asking this question from some other devotees, and she has this some scars forever, for always. You don't have this intimate discussion. So have this experience. When we built this house, Chaitanya Chandra Charan said that so read Bhagavatam every morning here, but when he used to go away, he said, he instructed us that you should read Bhagavatam here every day, even if it's just one person here, you should read it out loud. So when he was going away, when he was leaving us, when he would just go traveling, he told us that we had to read it every day. There were just some relatives here. There's also one more detail that I wanted to pay attention to. So when we have Bhagavatam class, just like Shukadeva Goswami. This is one thing. But now we have a very interesting situation. No matter who reads Shrimad Bhagavatam, he gives you this knowledge, you listen to it, even though there might be not such a deep meaning there, but you're still under the influence of this process, of this reading. And the person reading Bhagavatam, at this moment, he enters this position. He feels important because Bhagavatam is alive. It's the life itself. It's another taste. You're saying that it's an informal situation, more personal. So it means when you read it to the people that are close to you. So we've always read some books out loud so that we could hear it together. Even since our daughter was born, he always reads out loud. Even if it's not just for 30 minutes. Chaitanya Chandra Charan, he likes to read. He's got this taste. He can be reading for 1 or 2 hours. And that's how this dialogue emerges. This is our level, but this is our own, our native Krishna's consciousness. So what we do is we read a passage, and then when there are some questions emerge, we discuss them. We should not argue with each other. We should hear everybody out, and then read another passage, some other questions, and I've caught myself on such a thing that I have so many questions that I've heard so many times and I've read about them so many times, but I don't still understand them. And now, out of nowhere, I have these questions, and it turns out I don't even understand them. And you see, in this seemingly not perfect atmosphere, when we read Bhagavatam together, amazing things happen. You start understanding more things that you hadn't understood before. And then, where there were some questions that we couldn't answer, we would just write them down into our notepad, waiting until Chaitanya Chandra Charan would come back and answer these questions. And it's very important to understand one thing. When senior devotees, they give you this knowledge, they follow some logical pattern. They read some verse, they discuss it, and then they bring you to one conclusion. Even during Vyasasana, there are some groups of devotees. When some devotees, they start reading something, they forget what they started the conversation with. So you have to always make a conclusion. If you start from something, you have to finish it. Do not go away. Do not get distracted. Even if you give some mystics or psychology, but it has to answer with help of the absolute truth. There has to be the righteous conclusion. And we have to learn it in small groups. So we have to make this knowledge our own knowledge. We have to learn how to communicate. And through this, we can learn a lot of different things. To respect others, to change our personality. Because there are a lot of things that come on the surface, because I think of myself, a lot of different things, funny things. a lot of different things happen when you read it in small groups. You see, we would sit for 2 or 3 hours discussing Shrimad Bhagavatam, and then I felt suddenly that my taste to Bhagavatam has become different. It has become very tasty, very interesting. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting in such a small circle with the devotees, discussing something, not arguing, not quarreling, but just digging into the truth. So this is an amazing experience. So Gaurachandrika, what she has just said, this is the base of Varnashrama. So she was talking about family readings. This is a great addition. This is something new. When we say family reading, when we all get together, this is a very important thing for Grihastha ashram. This is a great samskara when you have this spiritual unification in family. On the platform of Shrimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, platform of Srila Prabhupada, we all get united. Using this experience, we can build Varnashrama Dharma, listening and chanting. So I think we have to spread this new term, family reading. That's a great proposition. That's a great proposal. We have to learn not to get distracted, to stick to the context. So this is going to develop our spiritual intelligence. It seemed to me that Maharaji Gaurachandrika said about the atmosphere that is created in such small groups when you know well each other, an informal atmosphere, and I think that's very important. When Krishna appears in the form of Katha, Premananda Prabhu, you're welcome to ask your last question. Turn your mic on. Premananda Prabhu, we cannot hear you for some reason. Can you hear me now? Yes. So thank you so much for the lecture, Guru Maharaj. I got 2 questions. The first one is, you've said today that stop thinking about yourself, and I think a lot about myself. So how do I get rid of this conception of mine and not mine? That's the first question. And secondly, how do I develop spiritual relationships with my wife if she's a Muslim and I am in a Krishna consciousness? Oh, this is even more interesting. You can read together not only Bhagavad Gita but Quran as well. You're very lucky. So if you have these good relationships, this is a great thing. I really advise you to read Quran and Bhagavad Gita together. So you read Bhagavad Gita, she listens to you, and she reads Quran, you listen to her, you discuss it. I think this is a great thing. This is a splendid combination. Mine and not mine. Offer everything to Krishna, at least in your mind. Everything that you have, offer to Krishna. Offer your wife to Krishna. Start with this. Maybe you've already started doing it. In some sense, you are already practicing. You're already offering Krishna your speech, your mind. You've been already practicing. And then eventually you will understand that your house is also is a property of Krishna. Your work, your job, your relatives. And eventually you will agree with that, and you will see that it's magnificent, it's great. This is all the wealth of Krishna. That's what path you have to take, but you're in the process of it already. Just keep going. So I see someone sewing something. What are you doing there? Right? Like a seamstress? Someone is tailoring something. Vilasi Maharaji, can you turn your microphone on, please?
Вас очень тихо слышно.
Your microphone, we cannot hear you very well, unfortunately.
Сейчас слышно?
Can you hear me now? Yes?
Это платье ручной работы для
I'm just
танцовщицы.
making a dress for some dancer. I'm tailoring a dress.
Для Кришны, на самом деле.
This is for Krishna, matter of fact.
Да, для Кришны.
Of course, it's for Krishna.
Хорошо. А танцовщица просто воспользуется этим.
And the dancer will just use it.
Потому что пока я шью это платье, каждое утро я слушаю
It's just
Бхагаватам.
every
Я
morning
думаю, что,
when I tailor this dress, I listen to Shrimad Bhagavatam. And I think that my work should be spiritualized.
Да, главное одухотворить
Yeah, the main
разум,
thing is
да,
you have to
работа
spiritualize your
сама по
mind.
себе,
But the
сама
work
по себе как бы
itself,
становится в этом русле
it becomes,
естественным образом.
it follows the trend,
И если ты это делаешь
the direction.
регулярно, и
And if you do it regularly
квалификацию,
and
это всегда
you
полезно.
you're working, you're improving your qualification, this will always be useful. Think about your art and improve your skills. And of course, the payment, the salary will come. If this is a good job, if it's a good quality, you just think, concentrate on Krishna and think about your qualification. All the rest of the things,
Чандра Махарадж,
they will
я
come naturally.
хочу поприветствовать
Chaitanya
всех
Chandra Charan,
преданных и вас.
I wanted to
Примите мои
greet all the
поклоны.
devotees and you,
Я хочу
and please
воспользоваться случаем,
accept my obeisances.
поблагодарить вас
I wanted to use this occasion and
труд, за
to say thank you
вашу преданность
to you for
Кришне, за то, что
for
вы
what you do,
являетесь,
for your
для нас.
devoteness to Krishna,
Э,
and for that you
для
are,
меня лично вы
for me
Шикша
personally,
Гуру,
you are
и
Shiksha Guru,
человек, которого я
and the
слушаю
person
лекции всегда, и
that I
когда
always
трудности,
listen
я
to, and
всегда,
whenever
слушаю
I
ваши
have
лекции,
some difficulties, I
выхожу из
always
этого болота какого-то,
feel, I always listen to your
могу
lectures and get out of this
просто
swamp when my
помнить
mind is
каких-то,
just sinking
страданиях или
in some
бедах. Ну, в
lamentations,
смысле, не то, чтобы
some
это
forest.
причинять какие-то на сегодняшний день, конечно, мне уже мало что может быть так сильно страдания причиняет.
Nowadays, probably not, there are not so many things that can cause some sufferings to me, but in the beginning of my spiritual practice, of my path, I used to have some difficulties. I always referred to your lectures, and it all became, Bhagavatam became clear to me, the essence of it, and I just wanted to say the words of gratitude to you. So yesterday I was listening to the lecture of my spiritual master. So whatever he was talking about the Lord Chaitanya. So remember, first he's trying to say what he's trying to say, then his speech is translated into English because he's got some difficulties speaking right now, and then you discuss it into you translate it into Bengali, and this has opened up a possibility for me to think about every phrase. He has given only 2 phrases. You know, the novelty of Krishna's consciousness got recovered for me. Just 2 phrases. Sometimes just 2 phrases are enough to balance everything out. This is amazing. So Prabhupada, remember, he used to say that one shloka can save you. One line, one word from Bhagavad Gita can save your life. So I ever thought that if I'm giving this lecture, someone else is tailoring something, someone else is doing something else, and then in the end of this lecture we show each other what we have done during this lecture. Now we get to know what every one of us is doing, and we can share everything that we have done.
Да. Вчера мы в Ташкенте отмечали вашу
So yesterday in
Пуджу.
Tashkent,
Вчера
we were celebrating Vyasa Puja,
появление духовного учителя, ваших
the
учеников,
birth of the spiritual master.
И
So your
меня тоже
disciples,
попросили, соответственно, сказать
they've also invited me
рассказать о вас.
to tell about you.
А?
Ты все хорошее рассказал, что-то?
Did you
Да,
tell
вот
him
что
only the
скажу.
good things?
Я вот
So now I'm gonna tell you.
только что вы дали интересный ответ или поговорили с Виласиной Матаджи и сказали, что
So
вы
you've just talked to
делаете
Vilasi
свою
Mataji.
работу, при этом медитируя на
You told me that you're doing your
движение. И вот
work and
тебе
meditate
приводил
in your
пример,
devotional
как
service.
вы всегда
So there's one
рисуете,
example is how you always
рисуете,
paint your
делаете
pictures.
наброски, карандашом,
First you make some sketches,
красоту Господа, который
and then
проявлен
you
в материальном мире.
underline the beauty
Я
of
дальше
the
сделал
Lord.
вывод, что любой, кто будет смотреть на
And
ваши
then I've
картины,
drawn a conclusion that anyone looking at your pictures, they will be progressing,
это не просто
because
там набор красок,
it's not just a combination of
в
paints,
первую очередь это сознание, и это ваше
it's also
сознание.
about consciousness, and this is your consciousness. Because when you paint, when you draw, you do it in Krishna's consciousness, because Krishna says, this is all my emanation, my manifestation. It's not all a picture, it's preaching. So Vilasini is is making this dress, and by just having touched this dress, that girl wearing this dress in the future, she will also have this contact with Krishna. So Chaitanya Chandra Charan prabhu, please keep painting pictures, and people just looking at your pictures, they will be progressing in Krishna's consciousness. So once I was painting a pumpkin, a big pumpkin. So I painted it. I've painted this pumpkin, and then I thought to myself, what kind of preaching is there in this picture? And then in Vrindavan, some time ago, everything comes spontaneously there in terms of creativity. And then only in Vrindavan you get these very unusual samskaras. And then when I looked at this picture in Vrindavan, there was a totally different impression. Then when Gaurachandrika, we've made some sketches of Krishna, Balaram, Madhumangala. And then I still have this picture upstairs. I've still been working on it. So Balaram is feeding the Madhumangala. So Krishna is smiling there in a relaxed way, resting on Balarama's knee, and there are so many dishes in front of them. And there I had to paint a watermelon, and then I've remembered this experience of pumpkin, and that's how I've managed to do it. So especially in this moment of time, I may think that it's not connected with Krishna. You know, it's just a pumpkin. But of course, this is Krishna's energy. But then it all comes together. And you use this experience for serving. Where else can it be used? In any profession can be used in serving, in servitude. And finally, if you think of Krishna, everything will be connected with him. So that's one example I've come up with. Sometimes I can see the beauty, but the volume of this beauty is inexhaustible. It happens suddenly sometimes, just out of nowhere. You take this beauty and paint it. And then when you connect it with Krishna, it all works. You will find this samskara to connect it all with Krishna. It's like you study at universities and then you serve to Krishna using your qualification. This is the same thing. This is all, it all can be connected. So don't you ever forget about Krishna. Work on your qualification, on your profession and skills, on your family responsibilities. Just keep improving, but never forget about Krishna. So remember about me in fight. Well, we fight with each other quite often. We already do it.
Осталось еще вот эту вещь, добавить помнить о Кришне.
So we have to only add one thing. Remember about Krishna.
Хорошо, спасибо большое.
So thank you,
Пада, Ки,
everybody.
Чай.
Shri Prabhupada ki
Bhagavatam
jai.
ki jai, Его милость Chaitanya Chandra Charan prabhu ki jai, Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol, Hare Krishna.